Hello and welcome to Social Work in Violence Prevention. I'm Janine Mariscotti and I'm a professor in the Social Work Department at LaSalle University. And today our guests are Hassan Freeman and Reuben Jones. Hassan is a student in the social work program at LaSalle and also is involved in a program called Focused Deterrence, a program designed to reduce gun violence in South Philadelphia. Reuben Jones is an activist, an author, and motivational speaker who currently serves as executive director of Frontline Dads. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Maybe you would start, Hassan. Tell me a little bit about you and how you've gotten into the work of violence deterrence and prevention in Philadelphia.
I've been involved for, I want to say about 10 years now. I was recruited initially by an organization called Men United for a Better Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. It was a collaboration of men from all walks of life, politicians, police officers, and things like that, who wanted to see a change in Philadelphia. At the time, I think the homicide rate in Philadelphia was averaging almost 400 murders a year. Mm-hmm. Men decided that they wanted to stand up and do something about it, so we all got together and came up with a strategy of outreach that basically would help reduce the gun violence in Philadelphia by taking a holistic approach, servicing the needs of the community. After that, I basically got recruited by the Pennsylvania Prison Society, which kind of became more of a preventative for reentry, where I would go into the prisons and educate people on life skills, conflict resolution, things like that. Then that actually was what led me to Focused Deterrence. Focused Deterrence is a strategy that we can get into deeper, but it's a strategy that deals with group violence in the South Philly area.
Okay,
so
all right, so we'll come back and you'll talk a little bit more about Focused Deterrence.
Right.
Reuben, would you talk a little bit about how you got involved in violence deterrence and prevention?
Certainly. So it's amazing how Hassan's and my life kind of parallel. So I previously worked for the Pennsylvania Prison Society, went on to, after Hassan took a position with Men United, was able to go over there and do some work, intervention work in schools.
Okay.
And then I went into clinical counseling at an outpatient facility and was later introduced to Focused Deterrence as an outreach strategy. I've been working in the field of prevention for probably the last 12 years or so myself in different capacities. So some of that involved direct outreach with young people and people at risk, people who were perpetrators of violence, but also worked on the other side as a counselor, working with people who have been victims of violence and families who have suffered through the loss of violence. So I did a project with Tova, which focused on healing family members who lost people to gun, particularly gun violence. It combined with people who have been perpetrators of gun violence and brought them together on the stage presentation, so to speak about healing. And it was about a 2-year-long process. I did some work with Blueprint for Saving Philadelphia, which addressed a lot of the young people who were becoming victims of violence. And I run a mentor program, and a lot of our young people have been victims of bullying and violence as well, in addition to suffering from various forms of trauma through drug addiction in the family and absentee fathers and physical, sexual, and verbal and emotional abuse, bullying, and other forms of neglect and abuse as well.
Okay, so you've really worked on both sides with perpetrators as well as victims.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Hassan, could you talk a little bit, tell us about Focused Deterrence?
Well, Focused Deterrence is a strategy that comes out of Boston. It was created by David Kennedy. David Kennedy created this strategy that kind of targets group activity. It's a collaboration of law enforcement, social services, and outreach. And what happens is that through a process of intelligence gathering, you identify a specific group, and you call this specific group into a courtroom setting, and basically they are given 2 alternatives. The first alternative is a law enforcement alternative, which stresses that the violence must stop, the gun violence must stop. And if the gun violence doesn't stop, they're going to be prioritized. It's not just going to target that individual, it's going to target the group that they actually associate with.
I see.
That law enforcement consists of state police, the Attorney General's office, Philadelphia police, electric company, you name it.
Wow.
They're going to target that. But the side that we come into is the flip side. If you decide to stop engaging in gun violence, Ruben basically is the caseworker that you'll call. And when you call Ruben, he's going to prioritize you as well. And in prioritizing you, through self-identification of your needs, we're going to try to provide you with the sources. Now, once they call Ruben, what Ruben does is he gives me the name, and I go out and do the outreach and explain to them why they should get involved with the social service component of focused deterrence.
Okay.
Focused deterrence is also, it's a strategy that's kind of like changing as it goes on, because
Okay.
again, it's a pilot program, but our outreach actually does group therapy as well. We
Okay.
bring the guys in, we do collective group therapy, allow these guys to actually communicate with one another, because they're from different, I don't want to say gangs, but different corners. Because in Philadelphia, it's not gangs, it's more so the corner that you grew up in.
And you would bring together
We would bring
different
together,
people from different corners.
right, among
Wow.
other things,
Right.
right? But in the bringing them together, we get them to communicate, start
Yes.
communicating and things like that. So that's basically my aspect of focused deterrence.
Okay. So, Ruben, when the client, I guess,
Client.
being a social worker, we
That's
use
what
the
we
term client, when the
Right.
client contacts you, and the client does that of his or her own volition, is that
Right.
correct? I mean, they make the
Right.
choice to do that, and they contact you, and then what are the next steps? What happens?
So, excellent question. The next step is to get them in to do a needs assessment. We need to figure out what they need. Of course, everyone needs a job.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's just not enough jobs to go around. But we do have two partnerships that allows us to provide transitional work opportunities, as well as we have an employment specialist partner who then works with them to help them obtain full-time permanent employment. So we get them in, to do this needs assessment and just kind of identify what areas in their lives do they need help with. And again, as helpers, we can't, impose on you
Right.
what we think you need. They have to self-identify. And once they do that, we have an array of resources that includes everything from drug and alcohol treatment to mental health treatment to group counseling. We do, Hassan kind of, I think, didn't spend enough time talking about what happens when those guys come together. Because you have to remember, these guys were identified as most likely to kill or be killed because of their affiliation
Right.
with different corners in South Philadelphia.
Okay.
So the amazing thing that we've discovered is that once we put them in the room together, under different circumstances,
Yes.
they're able to relate differently. They're able to open up. They become almost childlike in the way they interact. So all of the fear and mistrust is gone. And it doesn't happen magically, but there's a process in which the distrust kind of dissipates. And,
Wow.
you begin to say, well, I was carrying a gun because I heard you was going to shoot me.
Right.
And then the other person's like, well, I heard you were going to shoot me. So sometimes it's worked out in a way of just, people kind of confronting what those fears are. And because
Right.
I'm from 18th Street and you're from 24th Street, don't mean we have to automatically be enemies, but because these conflicts have been intergenerational,
Right.
the assumption is because you're from 24th Street
Right.
and I'm from 18th Street, that we're going to be at odds.
Right.
But once we can kind of have an open dialogue as reasonable human beings, a lot of that fear is gone, a lot of distrust is gone, and now we can start to see each other differently and end up working together, end up doing community projects together. So it's a beautifully profound experience.
I was so intrigued when you talked about how it sounds like it's primarily men, is that true? Or is it
100%
only?
men.
Right.
100%, okay.
100%.
So these probably very sort of tough-looking acting
Oh,
men,
absolutely.
come to the program, and then I'm trying to imagine them in this group setting where, as you said, like the language you used was childlike. Wait a minute, I thought you were going to hurt me. Oh, no,
Right.
I thought you were going to, that it must be really as you said, profound, really even transformative,
Right.
even not just for
Absolutely.
those men, but for you all who work
For-
in the
for us,
area.
right.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. When I said childlike, I don't mean that disrespectfully either.
Right.
Oh, no, I
mean-
realize that. Yes.
So we had a situation where we had these guys from different groups, and we brought in pizza
Pizza.
and some
Yeah.
sandwiches. And you would have thought that these guys knew each other their whole life. You would have thought that they were school classmates.
Yeah.
And this was a lunchroom setting, you know, at recess or something.
Right.
Because for whatever reason, you know, the process that we engaged in, the food, the relaxed atmosphere, the trust that we built up, everything, you know, like you said, the thug exterior
Yes. Right.
Goes out the
just
window.
kind of melted away because we're breaking bread. We're sharing
Exactly.
the intimate moment that trusted friends and family share. So now, once we kind of let our guard down just a little bit to start dialoguing, then we start to have this moment of awareness, this moment of clarity. Like, wait, it wasn't what I thought it was.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because they don't often have that opportunity when you're in the heat of the battle, when the conflicts are at their highest, when the police is occupying the community saying, I know you're a bad guy and I'm going to get you.
Right.
So when you take them out of that environment, when you break down those walls and we just begin to communicate as human beings, it does become transformative for everyone in the room.
Right. Exactly. Right.
One of the things that because there's a flip side to it as well, that we identified is that the majority of the guys that are targeted are actually victims of gun violence themselves.
Okay.
And because of that, it's a trauma that they have never had treated.
Right.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that we try to do is through group discussions, we try to treat that trauma. And you see the dramatic change that they're making once you start dialoguing about it.
Yeah.
We had, unfortunately, one of our clients where he basically was traumatized. He had just gotten shot before he was in the call-in. And because that trauma wasn't treated immediately, there was an incident of gun violence in his community, and his only safe haven was to go get a gun.
Right.
And unfortunately, because he hadn't had that trauma treated, and that was his only course of action, he was arrested for violating,
Right.
the terms of focused deterrence.
Uh-huh.
Now, man, Ruben felt like, what if we would have treated that trauma because then he could have had a different outlet to
Right.
to that situation.
Right, that you recognize
Right.
that there are Band-Aid approaches, but
Right,
there are more,
right.
there are deeper approaches,
Right.
more significant ways that we could treat it that will have a longer term effect.
Right.
Before we go on, we're going to have to stop for a break in just a moment. And when we come back, I'd like to hear a little bit more. I also want to learn about Frontline Dads.
Okay.
And for a few minutes to have an opportunity for our viewers to hear a little bit about what they could do if they see violence or experience some violence, but we'll do that after our break.
Okay.
We're with Ruben Jones and Hassan Freeman in social work in violence prevention. We'll be back in a moment.
They said I would die.
My doctor told me I had ALS.
They said I wouldn't live to see my kids grow up.
But their doctors were wrong. Multifocal motor neuropathy, referred to as MMN, is a rare disorder that progressively weakens muscles in the extremities and is often mistaken for other serious neuropathies, as well as the ultimately fatal condition known as ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. But unlike those disorders, MMN affects only lower motor nerves and has no sensory involvement. Symptoms tend to be asymmetric and characterized by weakness, cramping, twitching, or muscle atrophy, usually beginning in the hands. Disease progression depends on the length of time the patient remains without the correct MMN diagnosis. With early diagnosis and treatment, most MMN patients continue doing the things they enjoy.
Cooking.
Gardening.
Spending time with my family.
For more information, please visit these websites.
The environment is my passion. Every day, I live for the outdoors and all of its challenges. That's why I enlisted in the Coast Guard. Now, I serve to protect the environment and defend my country. It's like I was born for this.
Were you born ready for a greater challenge? Find out at gocoastguard.com.
Training is about more than muscle. It's about inner strength. So I push myself. That's why I serve in the United States Coast Guard. I train with the best. A team that shares my drive and commitment. We collect intelligence, guard our shores against drug smugglers, and keep our waterways safe, because our nation expects more.
If you expect more, maybe you were born ready. Find out at gocoastguard.com.
Welcome back to Social Work and Violence Prevention. I'm Janine Mariscotti from the Social Work Department at LaSalle University, and I'm here today with Hassan Freeman and Reuben Jones, who are talking with us today about programs that they're involved in Philadelphia to help deter and prevent violence. And before the break, we were talking a little bit about someone who had reached out to you, and because of there not being maybe a quick enough response, he obtained a gun for fear of his own life, and then was not able to participate in the program. Is that accurate, or at least was? Maybe you would describe what happened.
Well, possessing the gun was a violation of the agreement with focused deterrent, so automatically he was arrested. But the tragedy is that because, again, his trauma wasn't dealt with, that was the only time that he, the only way he could feel solace. But there are ways that you can actually reach out, when there is trauma. We have a host of organizations in the Philadelphia area that you can call. Man, Reuben is in the process now of trying to get a hotline established where you can basically anonymously call that hotline. We're in the process of creating safe houses where someone that needs to get away just for a day or two, until this thing cools down a little bit. We're in the process of establishing that. But there's a number of anti-violence organizations that you can reach out to anonymously, or if you're willing to give your name and talk about it. So there's things that could be done.
Are there a couple of organizations that you would mention now for our viewers that if they have a concern, they're either a victim or a perpetrator of violence that they could contact?
Frontline Dads is one. Frontline Dads does more than just mentoring. It's a host of programs, strategies, I should say, that exist within Frontline Dads.
Okay, so that's the plug.
That's the plug.
Okay, so tell us, we have a few minutes, tell us a little bit about Frontline Dads, please.
Okay, sure. So Frontline Dads, one of the things that we do is provide mentoring service for at-risk youth. But additionally, we do workshops and trainings for men and women coming out of prison, transitioning back to the community. The other thing is we do parenting workshops for fathers who are disconnected from their children, either through custody issues or bad breakups or whatever. So we try to approach it, again, Hassan said holistically earlier, from a holistic perspective, because we think that in this city we have upwards of 300 to 400,000 men and women walking around with criminal records or some experience with the criminal justice system. We have half of the families, ended in married family, ended in divorce. So we have a lot of kids from single parent home. And then we have a lot of young people under the age of 18 who suffered through some traumatic experience. So we try to provide resources to address those three critical areas of need in the community, because we believe they go hand in hand. If you have a father who's incarcerated or a mother dealing with addiction, you're gonna have a traumatized child. And when that person comes back from treatment or comes back from incarceration, they need a process of reintegration that's gonna be beneficial and productive for him and his family. So we try to address it from that need. But we also partner with organizations in the community like Uni in the community, PAN, Men United for a Better Philadelphia, who specialize in addressing the issue of violence. So we not only support those efforts, but we partner with them to create events. Like for the last 3 years, we've been doing a youth violence prevention forum. So we've done it at Temple University, we've done it at Arcadia, and we're planning this year's event as well, where we bring in different practitioners who help young people address the issue of violence, whether they are perpetrators and have been identified as a bully or as someone, who's potentially going to be sent to alternative school, or if they've been victims of violence, either in the community or in school or in the home. And we also have workshops in that forum for parents as well to help them learn about resources, that can, be beneficial to their families. A lot of parents don't even know about the bully hotline because, unfortunately, in the African American community, a lot of young kids who are picked on don't identify it as bullying because bullying makes me look weak. So they don't even use that term a lot. So they certainly aren't using the bully hotline. So we really stress prevention of violence. We understand that a lot of organizations, including ours, who deals with violence after the fact, but we strongly believe that the most potent tool that we have in our toolbox is prevention.
That's great, thank you. I mean, you're talking and I'm thinking about social work and the role of social work, and I'm also aware that, Ruben, your educational background is psychology and counseling, and that Hassan is working toward his degree in social work, and yet they're so closely connected. As you're talking, I'm thinking you could be an honorary social worker in terms of...
He's been recruited.
He has been recruited in terms of how you view it. I mean, it's such a good fit with social work. Let me ask you, Hassan, a little bit about how you got into social work. It's a field that doesn't attract as many men. I like to say we need a few good men in social work as we would like. And what brought you to social work rather than another field? And what are some of the opportunities for social workers in violence prevention?
Well, I notice there's not a lot of men there. That's first and foremost.
Yes.
But I think what brought me into the world of social work is the generalist practice.
Okay.
And I think that I didn't want to just concentrate on one field. And the thing about social work for me is it kind of touched on all areas, whether it's sociology, psychology, it basically gives you a little bit of information that you can use in all of these key areas. So this is why I got into social work. Plus it kind of honed my skills in outreach. One of the things that I was attracted to was my little cousin actually attends LaSalle. And I sat in on dyads and things like that, and I was very impressed. So I said, well, might be something that I can actually use in the field that I'm already in. So I kind of felt like I was already a social worker until I realized that in the state of Pennsylvania, you have to be a social worker to say you're a social worker. Right. So, but that's why I got into it, because it touches on every aspect of, every concentration. It gives you a little bit of information on every concentration. So you can use this in any situation and be successful. That's why I got into it.
When you were just talking, I was thinking about what you said in terms of holistic. That's what it reminded me of. Do you see some distinctions? I wonder, Ruben, if you see distinctions between psychology / counseling and social work.
Yeah, I think that Hassan put it perfectly. I think we all consider ourselves social worker counselors before getting the validation of the degree.
Right.
So for me, it's as a helper, as a person who, I just feel that I went into this area because I'm interested in the spectrum of human experience. In psychology, we're interested in the why. We're interested in what happened. We are interested in solutions. Helping the person find an answer to whatever the identified problem is. In social work, the how is important. The what is important. The mechanism is important. So I think it's a perfect marriage. I don't feel like there's anything competitive between the two fields. I think they have to work hand in hand because we have a lot of people who are hurting. We have a lot of people in need, and we need both sides of that balance. I need to understand why I did what I did or why I think the way I think, but at the same token, I need to figure out how can I engage in the transformative process that's going to be a part of the healing. So.
Yeah, okay, that's great, thank you. Hassan, would you just talk, we have a couple minutes left, could you say a few words about why social work at LaSalle? There's other social work programs, a lot of them, but why here?
I did a lot of research. I went to a lot of campuses, and for me, LaSalle just had that home feeling, you know, whether it was Donna Erb, whether it was you, or, you know, it felt home. I wasn't in a classroom setting where the professor didn't know my name.
Right.
You know, if I'm goofing off, my professor would say, Hassan, you need to chill. And that was what I was looking for. You know, I tried online classes in the beginning. I didn't get that feel. Like I said, I visited a lot of other campuses and it just wasn't there. When I came to LaSalle, Donna Erb, I think it was Bonnie Zedek. And she was just like this grandmotherly, like, this is what we're gonna do. You laid it out. In my classes, they give you hands-on experience. You know, dyads is very important.
Right.
And I mean, you would think, I'm gonna use one of my professors, Susan. She was giving me these theories, and I never thought I would know it until I was actually going into the field and breaking down Kohlberg's theory of more reason. And I'm saying, well, this is what she taught me.
Right, you were using them.
Right, and I realized that those strategies that they used to educate me was the perfect strategy for me. And that, I'm glad we were able to get a master's program here, because I just love it.
Right, we're
I just love
working on it.
Right, exactly.
We're really out of time. I feel like we could have a much longer conversation and hope that we will at another time. But I do want to thank Reuben Jones and Hassan Freeman for being with us today. Social work department at LaSalle is growing. We offer coursework in the day, evening, and in a new online accelerated format. We hope you'll join us. Feel free to contact us. This is Social Work in Violence Prevention, and we are making a difference. Thank you.